feel even smaller when I stand up here. I hope you can see me. Okay. So, what makes a home? Basically, a house is shelter, security, and privacy. But beyond that, it depends who's asking the question, what makes a home? And most importantly, why you're asking. And I'm going to explore some of the tensions in what makes a home in our contemporary understandings. This beautiful little architectural experiment by Jean Manival, which is kind of a cross between a caravan and a portaloo, I suspect may not have made it into the next event I'm going to talk about, which has sort of very particular criteria for what constitutes a home. I didn't buy this magazine. Sure, it was found on my desk. A colleague lent it to me in the interest of research. It's a very interesting magazine, particularly for me because of what the judges tell us about the contestants who've renovated their homes for what they call the ultimate judging event, the buyers on auction day. The judges tell us that the buyers will be looking at general functionality and aesthetics, which are the greatest contributors when it comes to sale price. And then they sort of give us some specific directions about this. Each couple needs to renovate and decorate to a standard that is appealing and enticing to a buyer, but not make strong design statements that might scare them off. And down the bottom you can see some snapshots of the interiors, and they're beautiful interiors. They're very minimalist. They've got these little sort of heritage and soft furnishing touches, and I think it's one of those moments that really reflects the IKEAisation of contemporary taste. And I'm not using that as a derogatory term at all. It's a testament to the huge impact that a kind of minimal, affordable Scandinavian design has had on mass culture. Even though I personally find going to the stores very scary, and it induces enormous claustrophobia in me, which is why I won't be going to the 36,000 square metres of IKEA. They've forgotten the just remember, don't go over the top in your decorating and scare people off principle. I put the block judges' comments in because what they remind us of is that our taste is partly constructed by our culture, by the culture we live in. Even as we imagine that our homes are the most intimate expressions of ourselves and our individuality. And this is the first tension I'm going to talk about. The mass construction of housing and taste versus individual expression. The house was invented as a place for the display of individual identity in the 19th century. We forget this. Well, don't worry, I'm not giving you a history lecture, just a few points. Until at least well into the 19th century, most people lived in what were effectively mud huts. Wasn't much opportunity for decorating. Homes were the provision of the elite, and they were expressions of wealth and power. And what was invented in the 19th century was a new relationship between the artefacts you surround yourselves with, the externalisation of yourself and your inner world. Remembering, of course, that the 19th century was the century that gave us psychoanalysis, that insight and externalisation of our inner world. There's complex reasons why this occurred in the 19th century, partly because people moved from making things within their own household to buying things within the marketplace, buying commodities. But there are interesting contradictions here. How do you make artefacts that are widely available, expressions of your own authentic self? You can purchase things that are rare. You can curate them. This is the fashion principle of mix and match. So we all live in this tension between the social construction of taste in ourselves and our individual expression. Depending on your position, you might also describe the homes featured here in the Block magazine as investments and commodities. That's a very important tension in our contemporary idea of home. For some people, and I'm one of them, I think housing is a social right, that we need balance and limitations, and that I don't think housing should be completely dominated by the marketplace. So this is a tension between needing to balance marketplace demands and social responsibility. Everyone should have the right to shelter, privacy and security. Some people in other places in the world call housing a human right. Just how important these three things, shelter, privacy and security, are to the construction of self, to our individual identity, was brought home to me in a story The Age ran on August 29th about a local organisation called Servants Community Housing, an organisation that runs rooming houses. The house featured was a former mansion in Hawthorne, now called Caracal House. This is Matt Maudlin, the CEO. I'm sorry I scanned it from the paper. But I just wanted to show you a quote from a resident, Fiona, who'd grown up in abusive circumstances at home and school, and she had this to say about her definition of home. "This place is home. I was given a room in the mansion, and since I've been here, I call my home my piece of heaven. I have never felt so safe in my life before as I do now. This family of people have taught me how to feel safe." This is a really powerful statement about housing. Last week, or maybe it was the week before, was Homelessness Week. There are at least 45,000 homeless people in Victoria and 38,244 people, apparently, on public housing waiting lists. In the first quarter of 2011, the Tenants' Union reported that people on Centrelink benefits, such as singles, students, pensioners and parents on benefits, were paying 2/3 of their income and above for suitable Melbourne residences. A struggling inner-city family earning $67,000 per year to support 2 adults and 2 children who lived in Brunswick, for example, would pay 40% of their income on rent. We know that the intersection of rising demand, the slowness of replacement housing and rental properties as investments is contributing to housing distress and housing crisis. So a home is a much larger place than individual site boundaries. And I'd like to think about it in terms of what is this larger home of ours called Melbourne. Stephen Nash from Home Ground, a homelessness organisation, says, "There is no progress in homelessness without housing." We run the risk of living in socially segregated cities. And this is important. We know that homeowners are experiencing mortgage stress, and some people may never be able to enter the home or apartment owning market. What would make Australia a better home for us all? More affordable housing, both public and private, both social housing and non-social housing. Here's a terrific quote from an architect from Sydney, Adam Hanno, which asks that we should see social housing as a representation of our culture, that housing is part of our Australian identity. There is good local work being done here, and I urge you to go and look at the May-June 2011 issue of Architecture Australia magazine called Housing Futures. I don't have enough time to go through the work in that issue. And the third tension I want to talk about is about durability and sustainability. One of the wonderful things about working in architecture is the intransigence in some ways of materiality, the intransigence of durability of bricks and mortar, timber and concrete, against the fact that buildings are in continual process of occupation and weathering. Those of us who live in Melbourne may live in old houses where the social organisation of the house was imagined 100 years ago, and we outgrow them. But renovating and changing housing costs not just money, but resources. One pressing question is how we can build flexibility in without continually expending more and more resources and money in changing our existing housing stock, and also how we might produce more flexible models of housing. Unbelievably, by 2026, we expect that 30.2% of households will be lone person households. That's nearly a third of our future housing stock of people living on their own. So there's going to be different kinds of household arrangements. And now for my architecture plug. It's a beautiful house designed by a Perth architect. See, we don't only show Melbourne buildings in Melbourne Talks, although some people think that's the case. This beautiful building by Simon Anderson in Netherlands, in Perth, known as the Factory House, where He tried to make the house, this is an ongoing project he's doing, looking at affordability. It was reputedly $1,300 a square metre. I got this out of Architecture Australia and I know they check their facts correctly. I've got a former editor in the audience. There are various things that Anderson did to keep the cost of the house down, including having a fully customised kitchen from IKEA as the kitchen rather than architect design. And no, IKEA are not paying me for this talk, although I sound like I'm doing product placement. I'm not. I'm just interested in the phenomenon. It's a great counter to the stereotype that architects are basically upmarket stylists with expensive fees. Some of us are interested in affordability and housing. Houses are not simply occupied but inhabited, to use the words of Tom Rivard. For me, the word is not home or house, but housing. Our houses, even our dishwashers, exist within a network. Our waste and water pipes connect us to other places and other people and communities. Our society, I hope, is not just a home-owning nation, but something passionately interested in housing as a social issue, as a community issue for all of us. Thank you.